Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste to all. Welcome to Knowledge Webcast. Let's welcome our guest, John Hovell, who is the Managing Director and co-founder of Tactical International LLC. Firstly, welcome, John. Good morning, and how are you doing today?
Good morning, good afternoon. Always good to see you, Santhosh. I was trying to think as I woke up this morning, when was the last time you and I were together in person in Oman? Was it 2016, 2017? How long?
It's been some
been a
time
few
now.
years, I guess.
Yes.
Yes, good to see you virtually.
Yeah, indeed, and it is always a pleasure to speak to you. And we had various conversation around KM, and how do we? Even you reviewed my book, and brought a great feedback. Thank you for that. With all that, let's importantly let me start with the first important question. So, John, how did you start your knowledge management journey?
Sure, thanks for asking. I was watching some of your other knowledge webcasts. So what Dr. Levy, Dr. Shelley, Dr. Vincent, I think Stephanie was the most recent. So I was appreciating hearing all the different journeys. Yeah, happy to share how I came into it. I think I'm one of these knowledge management practitioners that would use this phrase of I've always been doing knowledge management. It was just not until the late 1990s that I learned to call it knowledge management. So I guess to say I was privileged to earn an undergraduate degree in the United States in a thing called decision support systems in the 90s is what that was called. And then went on to do a master's in information systems technology is what it was called at the time. So like Stephanie and like a couple of your other guests, quite an upbringing in the information technology side of the house. And yet I was lamenting to a colleague of mine that 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years into my IT career, how we would spend all of this time designing systems and trying to involve people to think about, we didn't call it user interface or user experience in those days, but using today's language, working on that, having those types of conversations, thinking everything was designed well and going to work well. And then for one reason or another, either the IT side, the actual technical implementation wasn't effective or didn't work, or the people side. The people didn't enjoy the tool or didn't use the tool, or it didn't work out, let alone, did we actually improve a process when we were rolling out these tools? So like many of your guests have talked about, the people, process, technology, all three have always been of deep interest to me. But it wasn't really until just after 2000, 2001, 2 or 3, somewhere in that time frame, where I first heard the phrase knowledge management. In fact, it was a friend of mine who said to me, I think this was right around when Google was first coming out, give or take, who said to me, I think you need to look up knowledge management. I think you're really going to like it. And he walked away.
Okay.
he had practiced knowledge management, but he knew me well enough to just drop the phrase and then let me go off and do my own work to look it up.
Good.
Yeah.
You met him at the right time, and because of which
magical timing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, please continue.
And then I guess the rest is history. There's always more details to the story, but yep, that's the start.
Yeah. So did you always start with the knowledge? Early 2000, I think knowledge management was quickly gaining grounds, and So did you start your first job, or how did you get into knowledge management job, or what was your first job as? How did you start the knowledge management job?
Sure. So yeah, I think even doing the first jobs were all information technology jobs, and then leading information technology teams. So a lot of writing code and maintaining websites and that kind of work. There was a chief learning officer at one of the companies I worked for. And he saw the work I was doing and the way that I was doing that work. And he said, why don't you leave the IT the information technology function, and why don't you come over to human resources, not so much to join human resources, but to specifically join learning and development.
Okay.
So this was a big, scary career change. And that title was actually a knowledge management title.
Okay.
When I moved from IT into what was technically human resources at the time. And from there, it's always been knowledge management, organization development, diversity and inclusion, either job title or projects that we were working on. So that's whatever that's been, I guess, almost 20 years.
Yeah, incredible journey, I would say. And in fact, we always met, and you always were, also in the space of training, knowledge management for some time, and that's how we also met, right? So in the one of the KMI courses. So now we will take two steps back and actually cover this area called knowledge management a little more, because recently I was kind of looking at some of the conversations on the LinkedIn and other things. So somewhere I think I felt that over the last 20 years, our knowledge management system has become synonymous to knowledge management IT system. So it's so closely entangled. Today you speak with somebody saying that, okay, let's start a knowledge management system. The first question is, okay, which tool should we start with? Which is completely opposite of exactly what knowledge management should start, right? So now, how do we reposition this in the industry? Because when we say knowledge management system, it's a system independent of technology, right? It's a knowledge. Yeah. So how do you see this? Because you have knowledge management as in a field. Today in a startup world, you have fintech industries where it is clearly defined, saying that, okay, you might have fintech startup, but it is into financial domain related IT system, and it's not a tool, right? So how do you look at these things? It's clearly defined. Now, why can't we reposition our knowledge management system as independent of technology? Is it possible to do that? And how do we do that? Yeah. The question is to you, because you have been interacting with people across the world, conducting various trainings, and meeting all the people. So what's your take? And do you think it is necessary, first of all? And secondly, is it if it is necessary, how do we really reposition KMS, or cognitive understanding behind it? Yeah.
Is it necessary, and how do we reposition? Let me write it down so I can try and share a few words. And yeah, we can both chat about it, right? Is it necessary? I guess I'll come from this thought of both and. I think we really do need to try and have people, culture change, or culture augmentation, or rethinking what do collaborative, learning, reflective cultures inside organizations or beyond organizational boundaries look like, the people side. There is absolutely a process improvement aspect of knowledge management. I think I need to be more and more honest with myself that I think one of my I love culture work, I love technology work, but I find that process improvement work or process observation work, even noticing what is the process, whether it's formally documented or not, and improving processes, I happen to really enjoy those aspects of knowledge management. So more than a both and, it's people and process. It's not just both, there's an and of technology. So is it necessary? I mean, and this goes into your repositioning as well. So it does kind of answer both, or share some thoughts on both questions. It is necessary because if you go out and search, and on LinkedIn, one of my hashtags that I use the most is KM jobs.
Yeah.
Anytime I see any job remotely related to knowledge management, I try to add the hashtag KM jobs. And quite a majority of them are on the technology side.
Yeah.
So I think this is both necessary and rethinking. I think it's necessary because there just seemed to be a push or a momentum towards the technology side of knowledge management. Fine, it's important. And process improvement is important, which is regardless of technology. And culture change or cultural awareness is important, which is often regardless of technology, or regardless isn't even the right word. Again, it's all in this big complex system where everything is affecting each other. So that's, I think, the necessary side. Yes. I'd also love to mention tacit, implicit, and explicit. I think back to, is there confusion? Is there blurred lines here? I'm not sure. But if explicit is the information management side of knowledge management, all the technology, anything that can ever be written down and made available, and scarce expertise and explicit knowledge, information shared. Great. That's an important part of KM. I was actually on a walk recently, and I wondered, back to, should we get rid of the label of knowledge management, or should we relabel it something else? I'd have thought that probably is not my own thought, but I was thinking, what if we called it TKM and EKM, tacit knowledge management and explicit knowledge management? That would be that would add some clarity. That would, to your, like, is it necessary and reposition? Maybe that's what we need. KM is both.
Yeah.
That's why other people have called it knowledge services or collaboration services, or even just collaboration, trying to bridge across both. And yeah, I think the repositioning is, at least the circles and the networks and the people I love to work with, we are very interested in both the tacit side and the explicit side. And then the even less mentioned implicit, the shared assumptions that we all have that are very rarely talked about or sort of, worked into the KM conversation. And so, yeah, I think it is necessary. And I do think there is some repositioning, or depending who you're talking to, repositioning, because I think some people are already practicing from that perspective. But how about for you? Do you think it's necessary? Do you think it needs to be repositioned?
I think, John, one of the things we always connect back to this, changing the label, or is it necessary? I think your question and my point of view, do we really need to reposition? I think it is little essential, because now with the flavor of the day is digital transformation. I mean, that is one thing. Again, now you have the new flavor, the next artificial intelligence, right? So when such new flavors are coming into marketing, and that is kind of really expanding beyond even, I mean, it's like some $1 billion industry now. I mean, digital transformation, right?
Right.
Probably we could never imagine knowledge management to be $1 billion industry. Purely services. I'm not talking about technology. Technology, maybe, some of the that has already happened and that moved forward, and it has evolved into various multiple services and into knowledge as service and various things, right? Now, if we really need to reposition, if we do not reposition today, what exactly is knowledge management, then I am afraid that people will always assume that there's no difference between IT people and knowledge management guys. That is fundamentally, there's a collusion, and the importance of knowledge management uh, profession as a whole would dwindle down over a period of time. Somehow I feel this essentially.
Sure.
Yeah. So if we have to avoid that, and if we have to expand in a different horizon, somewhere I feel that knowledge management system, when you say system, it has to be holistic, and it needs to be independent of technology. Technology could be part of it, but the moment when we go to board, when we go to CEO, when we talk about knowledge management system, essentially we are not even talking about technology. No, maybe after 3 years, let's talk about technology, but let's figure out what knowledge is essential at various level, various role. Probably if we go from that perspective, I think our community would grow, and our importance of knowledge management would re-establish. This is my view.
Agreed. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. So yeah, with that, I also wanted to kind of talk about one of the theme which you are also kind of trying to you've been working with David Gertin on this conversational leadership. Since our topic and this conversational leadership again touches upon the social fabric of knowledge management as an implicit, right? So somewhere, this conversation leadership can become a tool or a form of body of knowledge which can enhance the social collaboration. So would you want to speak about this, conversational leadership, and why do you think it is very important, or where are you coming from, and how did this all started? I mean, with David Gertin, please. Yeah. you can.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for asking. Because yeah, we are very excited and quite passionate about this new label, conversational leadership, and of course, trying to be careful with labels and maybe not even use a label, but it does help to, for you to ask a question and for us to engage in it. So you're right. David Gertine, very active. Danita Folkvane, very active. Saleh Manane, very active. Dr. Juanita Brown, David Isaacs, David White. There are quite a few people around the world sort of working in different ways about this concept of conversational leadership. There's a few different ways to look at it. One, David Gertine has a fantastic definition of it. I don't have it memorized, but it's something to the effect of realizing the underutilized power of conversation, something like that.
Okay.
It's a great start. I know one angle, one perspective we start with conversational leadership is, unfortunately, in many organizations that we're so lucky to consult or partner or work with, there's still a leadership definition or a leadership style that's authoritarian, dictatorial, yell and tell, command and control. There's a time and a place for that type of management or leadership or direction, vision, teamwork, maybe. There's a time and a place. But it seems like more often there's a time and a place for, rather than a one-way push, rather than a hierarchical guidance or structure, maybe there's an opportunity for a two-way conversational approach to running organizations, leading conversations, working with people. What's the old adage? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. That kind of, where could we go together? So that's one angle of like rethinking the definition of conversation, rethinking the definition of leadership. I'd love to get into both of those for a moment. That's one angle, like a more conversational approach, and deeply aware of, are we actually in conversation? Are we actually shifting each other? Another one is, and again, this kind of comes in the work and the practice that we do. Isn't it fascinating to take a past, present, future view of the world? Now, some would say there's no such thing. There is only this moment, and that's all that ever existed, and the past and the future are already embedded within this moment. So that's one way to look at it. I guess the chronological way to look at it would be, conversations have gotten us to this point in history. So if the conversations had been different 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 1,000 years ago, what might today look like if the conversations had been different? From a diversity, equity, and inclusion point of view, what if it had been a more equitable type of conversation happening globally or across cultures or across, different parts of the world and different organizations? Potentially things would look a lot different. So that's what we're, I guess, trying to frame, the two-way conversational approach, but also let's not leave conversations up to chance. Let's actually be, like a knowledge management practice, let's reflect on, Santhosh and John are attempting to have a conversation right now. How's the conversation going for you, Santhosh? How's the conversation going for you, John? How's the conversation going for the relationship between us? That you own part of, I own part of, society is contributing. That part of conversational leadership is really exciting. And there's much more to say, but I'll pause there. How is that resonating with you?
No, it's quite very deep, and it's really, it's kind of quite philosophical. At the same time, I think, I also feel you're bringing that philosophy into practicality of corporate, environment, which is essential. That's what once, in one of the workshop somebody was saying that it is, even though what we take for granted as collaboration, we understand, but we don't really understand. So similarly, what we take for granted, like conversation, is common sense. It may not be common. Again, the moment you become a leader, there's a different baggage or different hat you wear, and you speak from a different point of view. How it appears to somebody else could be different. And I think that's where you're trying to bring this conversation leadership domain and open up, and then see how each of us can impact or affect each other in much more positive way. and take the
Yeah.
conversation more positive, move forward, right?
Positive, or if the conversation needs to be negative, then
Yeah,
an awareness of the negative aspects of the
yeah,
conversation. Just like knowledge, just like where we started this chat, knowledge management and information management often get sort of blurred and
yeah,
confused, or we sort of look at both at the same time. I think we're doing the same thing with management
yeah.
and leadership. And now Henry Mintzberg, who's not really specifically in conversational leadership, but he's in the space called what he's calling communityship, which we also love as a concept. In fact, we almost want to use the label conversational communityship.
Okay.
It might be a step, it might be a bridge too far right now. The idea is in management, we're organizing pieces, and it's a complicated view of the world. Put pieces together like a jigsaw puzzle. Leadership is the more complex people related aspects, working with other humans. I change you, you change me, we change the relationship, we change each other. Great. Communityship, well, poor leadership often gets thought of as, again, a one-way push. And so Henry Mintzberg is saying, maybe we should actually not stop using the word leadership, but create a new word, communityship, which is by definition kind of shared leadership. I step in, you step in. We know it when we see it. We can feel an equitable shared leadership or shared communityship across the group. And yeah, there could be positive and negative aspects to it. That's part of the complexity.
So, John, with this conversational leadership as a domain which you're trying to project in your practical life or practice scenario, I would try to kind of get in, probably look at innovation as an outcome or output, or in this space. I mean, how do you see? I think because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, leadership for what was our community ship?
Communityship. Yep.
Yeah, for the community ship, where you form the community, and community is for what you need to kind of sustain and innovate wherever you are in whatever form, right? So how do you see this innovation happening when these things all come together? Like, do you have any practical example, or how?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I almost need to check with a client to see if I can share a specific example, but yeah, I think I can generically share a specific innovation, tactical, measurable, results-oriented example. Right before that, I'd love to actually start with a quote, because when you talk about innovation and knowledge management and conversational leadership kind of all together, Dr. Patricia Shaw has a quote that we love in conversational leadership, where she says, I won't get it quite right, but it's to the effect of, leadership is convening conversations that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So almost by definition, you're talking about this conversation is innovation. We wouldn't have been talking about these questions. We wouldn't have been bouncing these ideas off of each other if we didn't convene the conversation in this way. If we sort of just let it happen, fine, that's one way to do it. There's also a way to, like a knowledge cafe, pose a question, and all the thought, the planning that goes into that question is quite impactful for the 60 or 90 minutes that follow the prompting of that question, convening a conversation that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So a knowledge cafe is maybe a generic tactical example, but sure, let me give you a literal client one. So there's one client who called us in and was looking for knowledge management strategy. They had never done knowledge management before. They're in an industry that has done quite a bit of knowledge management. So they sort of had this sense, this almost benchmarking knowledge that they knew they were behind, or they were needing to do something new. Now, this is where I have to be careful about how do I put it into exact words. They were looking to, we hear the word transformation a lot, but they were literally looking to take their current existing business and shift from their current customers and what they sell, their current customers, and move to a completely different market.
Okay.
Might need different employees, probably definitely need different customers, right? This is I could say this one. Think about the old IBM shift, where they went from mainframes to personal computers, right? Or big shift.
That's
you're kind of
continental.
Yeah, exactly. Or like Coca-Cola moving from literally just Coca-Cola, moving into all drinks, moving into, what do they call it? The market of the stomach. anything that goes into the stomach that's liquid, they want to be part of that, right? Big shift. Okay. So this real life client comes in and says, we're looking for KM strategy. We've heard about conversational leadership. What, will KM strategy help us move into this new market? So we come in, and the first thing we do is the KM strategic planning canvas, the Patrick Lamb Straits Knowledge exercise, fantastic card sorting exercise. We do that first. Now, they had big assumptions about what knowledge management was, and it was exactly where you and I started. They assumed it was all about implementing, should I say SharePoint? It was all about implementing a tool. And once the tool was up and running, then it was about learning lessons, writing lessons learned databases, writing stuff down and making it searchable. That was their assumption, a very common assumption of what knowledge management looks like. So we convene this strategic planning canvas to innovate. What is it that knowledge management is actually trying to solve? So I always have these cards right next to me, literally using the decks of cards that say, what are the 75 signals of knowledge and information management opportunities in organizations? So convening a conversation that otherwise wouldn't have happened to rethink, in your words, reposition what KM looks like and what it can solve. So let me go ahead and jump ahead. There's all kinds of workshops and projects and initiatives we did. Knowledge cafes, knowledge retention teams, knowledge management champions, knowledge management governance and steering committee, all of the knowledge management newsletter, annual knowledge management summit. All of these things were set up as tangible pieces, deliverables of KM. They're not done yet because it's still, it takes years and years to do this, but about 3 years into the process, they've already won their first clients in the new industry.
That's incredible. Yeah. That's the power of knowledge management, right? Yeah.
Which we can't directly say it was only KM that did that. There's a lot of other people, it's complexity, a lot of other people working on pieces of all the moving parts.
Yeah.
But yes, I would like to think that KM was a part of, for this particular client, fundamentally shifting what they do and who they do it for. It's a big change.
Yeah. I mean, there's absolutely fantastic case study of, how knowledge management could enable and, also help them to innovate their new business model and get new clients. That's I think this is where this is what is most important now. How do you really bring back this? See today. I mean, the reason why I am asking this question is today, if we have at least one knowledge management role in every company, knowledge management formal role, I think that then I would say our knowledge management industry has expanded, leaps and bounds. I mean, but that I think I that I feel still is long away. But what I think also is the knowledge management standard 30401 is something which I feel has kind of filled the vacuum. I mean, to reposition the KMS as kind of really is providing a new way of looking at things, because it is not just technology. I mean, that's exactly the standard is about. Again, they don't talk about specific solution. They don't say what to do, what not to do. So they're providing the whole life cycle of knowledge management and saying, yeah, this is what the system of knowledge management system would, kind of, these are the requirements that are the ontological or, high level. So now what is, how, I mean, from your experience, are you seeing more? Do you see there's a demand of these standards, or do you see organization asking or requiring more guidance on these standards? Maybe with these two questions, maybe we can have more conversation around this point.
Yeah, and again, because I know you're working so closely with it, I think, what are you, the second ever? It's you and Dr. Patricia Ung are the two that I know of.
Yes.
That are, and then I know Rupert Lescott, I believe, was one of the first ever to sort of go through from a client perspective, the beginnings of. So yeah, I've tried to stay very connected to it. Sure. I'll try and be as transparent as I can here. I was quite a skeptic, and there's still a part of me that is a skeptic of 30401, ISO 30401, Knowledge Management Systems Standard. Right. I mean, the first time I saw it, I saw the title. And as you said, the title is Knowledge Management Systems. So right away I thought, oh no,
Technology.
oh no, like we've been fighting. Like, there's this effort to like
Yeah.
people, process, technology in that order on purpose, and here they come in with systems. But if you really read through the 19 pages, I think it is, it's maybe it needs to say human and process and technology systems in the title, because I think the intent is there. I know the intent is there. It's written in the words that they're like the very first section is leadership buy-in, right? It's the very, so they're not just talking about technology, but I think from the outside, back to again repositioning, as you asked about, I think it's easy in this time and age to see the word system and
Yeah.
assume it means information technology tool software system, which I don't think it does. Okay, so started as a skeptic. I was quite appreciative. I don't think I had ever been involved in rolling out an ISO standard before, so I'm sure this is standard practice for them. But to me, I received it as a KM and a change management approach that I was not fortunate enough to be on the committee, but I certainly knew, as some of your other guests have talked about, was able to have one-on-one conversations with lots of people on the committee and hear their woes and what was going well and not going well and their challenges and successes. So, felt involved in that way. What I'm really saying is when they went through the release approach that I assume ISO always does, I was able to submit comments and I felt involved. I felt this body felt included in the process of rolling out, even though I wasn't like on a committee or anything. Some of the feedback and comments I formally put out there seemed to be considered or even put into the document. So your real question though was, is anybody interested or asking for it? My short, honest answer.
Yeah. What has been the demand? Yeah.
Demand. Yeah. Short answer is no, I don't currently hear demand for it. But what I would say is anytime I mention, most anytime I mention ISO 30401, people's eyes will light up. Their knowledge management people or business leaders will be interested in, ooh, tell me more about that standard. Can you send me a copy? Right? Can we talk about that? What I'll often say is there are 55 shall statements in there. And though, when we know legal language, shall is sort of it's not quite a requirement, but you should really consider these 55 things. And then what I've learned from Patrick Lamb and from others is that I won't say the right words here, but you could help me with this. It's not necessarily a compliance standard. It's a guidance standard, something like that, where you're not having to do these 55 things, otherwise you fail an audit. It's more like in the United States, we had Sarbanes-Oxley for a long time. It's more like to remain ethical, to remain above board, to have a mature quality KM program. Here's 55 things that we put a lot of work into that regardless of your culture, regardless of your process, regardless of your technique, regardless of the size of your company, here's 55 things that you should consider.
Yeah.
You tell yourself, your organization tells itself what it needs to focus on, and then we'll help you see if you're actually meeting some subset of these 55 things, these 55 shall statements. And in that sense, I can see some value. Now, there's two things that I'd love to vent out that I often show in a knowledge management class. It's not perfect. It's got a long way to go. It probably adds some value. It probably adds some confusion and some one size fits all, which I think in complexity, most of us would agree there's no such standard. There's no such one thing fits all, which has been a challenge in KM for a long time. But I do want to giggle, and I hope this brings a smile to maybe to newcomers to KM, but other KM practitioners. If you're fortunate enough to, be able to afford a copy of the standard and download it and look at it, go to the definitions section. And in the definition section, there is a definition for knowledge management, which we've struggled with for 25, 30 years now. There's no single definition of knowledge management. So when the ISO standard came out, quite a few of us were excited to flip to that definitions page and say, how did they do it? What is the standard international definition of knowledge management? And what's written in the document is management with the regard of knowledge. That's the definition, which is quite a broad definition.
That's exactly. That's why. No, I would say they've intelligently crafted it. I would say crafted it because if you see today, I'm probably share one or two points here. If you take innovation standards, whether you take HSE health safety standards or any other standards. So basically, now even before I talk about them, now I mean, today, if somebody new has to start KM, or they want to start some any KM system or IT system, they want to start with it. For them, generally who don't have IT or any kind of background, they just want to start like marketing or some non IT or non they purely business guys. For them, they need always steps. How do we start thing, right? So that void is filled with the standard. That's what I would say. It actually, that this 51 requirements or whatever the requirements lie down. How I see is, again, leadership. You need leadership, to sponsor. Once you have the sponsorship, then you define your knowledge problem.
Your needs. Yep.
That is one of the requirement. Again, you have to have your customer to speak to and document it. So whatever we do as an step by step process, same thing they have documented it as a requirement. So
One of the things.
yeah, maybe there are a lot of I mean, in fact, I recently released one mapping between the traditional knowledge management life cycle and how we can map the requirements into this, fit into this. So once you see that, I think most of the things, all the questions will go away, because I spent many for preparation of the ISO standard auditing or auditors preparation exam. I spent a lot of months studying, even 2 years, 3 years before the standard. I mean, in the formative years, that time also I studied, and so I had been on it for quite a long time. So then at one point, I kind of digested and understood the craft from where they're standing and how they've defined. So then with my practice, I try to bring that life cycle and this, and then kind of aligned it and give it as a simple, follow the steps. You don't have to worry about standard.
Is there any more words, like when it clicked for you and you knew where they were coming from?
Yeah.
Can you put words to that? Where do you think the standard is coming from?
Yeah. One of the important thing is they're not really looking at there are only two aspects here. Two aspect is the heart of the knowledge management standard is the whole knowledge management assimilation tools and processes and enablers, that the whole process, I mean, knowledge capture, knowledge dissemination, and that cycle. And then at the broader level, it is from the start of, in any organization, you start something and you end it, or you make the system or process or department or organization better. So there's that cycle and this too. So one is a linear one, which is always a progress, and one is specific, very scope. Yeah, it's your thing, right? So once you have those two things defined, then you can use this. Whether you are a small project, you can use this, right? Whether it is a large company, you can use this. So it becomes an very beautiful practice to use it and see how to go about doing it. Because again, they're not telling what to use, what not to use as perspective, as when it comes to tools or technology. They're not talking about that. They're saying
even approaches are not really mentioned in there. Yeah,
you can have hundreds of tools, you can have hundreds of ways of doing it. What they're saying is, are you capturing that knowledge? When they say capture it, again, they're talking about social, conversations, people talking. So everything is actually embedded in just that the clause of 5. That's the heart of KM. So if you actually look at it, once you get this, then everything else is a natural life cycle. And again, the third point is, no matter whatever you define, that is one thing. But end of the day, is it creating value to the organization? That is an auditor view. That's why we are going to say that yes, the tools or technology or the practices are being practiced or followed, and it is consistently recorded, and also management participation is made available to enhance the experience and create results. What results? Again, is there a documentation for us to showcase that? That is what we look at it. So if you look at that 3 or 4 points, critical points, then all other things, requirements are all like, either, it's a precursor, or, I mean, it is a part of the process, or it's enabling the process. So
Mm.
it's kind of all to coming together. So that's
Yeah.
how, I felt delighted that yes, this standard would make a difference, and maybe once we make this standard as a platform, even our knowledge management economy can grow. Not only, I mean, trainings, not only, see, technology is already solid. I mean, it's like last 20-25 years, technology of knowledge management has become really robust, and you can see most of the jobs in that stream. But when it comes to KM practices, when it comes to KM trainings, there are only few knowledge management consulting. There are few people, leaders in several countries, but I don't think we have Gartner kind of major knowledge management consulting company today. Sorry to say that, but at least I do not know. Maybe
Mm.
so there are in pockets. I mean, even there are so many individuals who are bearing the torch of knowledge management for so long, like you and many others, like,
Yep.
right. But again, if we do not all speak in one language, and kind of we do not echo and chorus the importance of knowledge management standard, if we cannot sell to the board, once we sell to the board, then again the management will come back to the knowledge management practitioners only to help them.
Yeah.
So we need to sell knowledge management standards to the board.
Yeah. I
So
think the agreement we probably most all of us will come from, and I know you'll hear this, heard it on your Bill Kaplan interview, is if it's for profit, we would say, what's the business need? And you
yes,
said that in there too. If it's nonprofit or government or military or something, it's what's the mission? What's the objective? Are we supporting the mission? Are we impacting the mission? Are we impacting the business?
exactly.
And part of me almost wants to say, and I haven't really thought this out loud before, so I'd love your thoughts on this too. Like, we find this in the Knowledge Management Institute courses as well. We have to play a little bit of a delicate balance where knowledge management actually overlaps with project management or program management or portfolio management, where oftentimes we're actually not even talking about communities of practice or lessons learned or expertise location or knowledge cafes or knowledge retention or any of the KM approaches that we do. And we're actually talking about putting together a change initiative, putting together a transformation, a project, a program, something that'll impact the business. And KM is sort of just one little piece of it, or there's a KM approach in the project approach. And I do see a lot of that in the standard, where it's stakeholder management, stakeholder buy-in, leadership buy-in, problem definition, which, yeah, I'm glad and I agree, it's part of knowledge management. I think if we had 3 or 4 project managers on this call, they would say, hold on, that's the project management side. So what value are you adding as knowledge managers? Which is a fair debate, I think.
See, this is how I say, you take a milk, you put a sugar, and you put a coffee color, right? You the taste of the coffee and the sugar is still there, but you cannot differentiate. It's
Right.
all one. That's why it's coffee. I mean, knowledge
And do
management.
you call it coffee or do you call it a mocha? Right? Like
Yeah, see,
the label is a funny thing too.
so this is what we are trying to redefine, reposition, whether we call it knowledge management, whether we want to call it external, or we want to call it as knowledge services, or right. But end of the day, the base is, you need to have you need to have a vessel to hold all these things.
Milk and sugar and coffee. Yep.
Right. So it's great chatting with you, John. I mean, it's an amazing, I don't know how last 50 minutes the time flew. And we really exchanged great insights, whether it was about conversational leadership, whether it is about, the repositioning or positioning of KMS, or whether we are talking about, the knowledge management standards. It has been really great to learn so many things from you. Probably if I would be very happy to. I think there's so many things you have kind of triggered me, to think around, and have so many questions. Maybe we should continue this conversation some other time too. But however, I really appreciate your time, and I also kind of want to would also want to kind of share that you are doing great thing on the conversation leadership. Our support, and whatever support for that we will always provide. I think that is very, very important aspect. Again, I somehow feel it's all part of knowledge management. Since under that umbrella, this and all are greater skills and domains, which is essential. So thank you, John, and hope we will get to meet soon and continue our conversation as always. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks. And congratulations on the book. Congratulations on the ISO standard work. Congratulations on this series. Thank you for helping me be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you. Have a great day.